guess we'll get started. Hi, this is Dave Warden. I'm with Joe Moats and Wynn Odell, and we're here at the NCO 2020. Have a conversation about effectively leading through challenge. And a little background on this is that when I spoke to Corey Rosen about this last year, and said, look, we'd like to do a panel that would be really of service to members of NCO. And he had suggested this idea. I think little did he predict that here we are in April, and this is probably one of the most relevant topics any executive or CEO could be thinking about, given the challenges we're all facing. So thank you, Corey, for the suggestion and your visionary foresight. I'd like to know what stocks you're picking for next year at this point. I'll try to get ahead of that. So let me also make a clarification. We've decided to adjust this panel slightly in the conversations to make this as relevant as possible. And so we had three topics that we were going to at least start the discussion with: how to effectively guide employees through important behavioral change. That was the first. Second, how to manage difficult, exceptionally talented executives and team members. And the third is to how to lead through a necessary layoff or restructure. And in preparing for this, Wynn and Joe and I talked, and we decided that we'd rather not talk to the second topic, or at least not lead with that, how to manage difficult people. We thought it'd be more important to focus on leading and guiding employees through important behavioral change, as well as how to lead through a necessary layoff or restructure. And we have a bit of a different spin on that. And we thought for a third starting topic would be how to thrive in difficulty, really thinking about the other side of the coin. So we're going to start off after Wynn and Joe do some introductions of themselves, going through those three topics. And then we welcome your questions that would be helpful to you. So with that, Wynn, can I have you go ahead and provide your introduction to yourself? And
Sure. So hi, I'm Wynn Odell with Odell Brewing Company in Fort Collins, Colorado. We started up about 30 years ago. It was my husband, my sister-in-law, and myself who started the company. Fast forward to 2015, we sold the majority of our company to a combination of our executive team and employee stock ownership plan. So we are now 100% employee owned and very proud of it and love what it does for us as a group. We are, I'm sorry, I totally lost track for a moment there. We're in a major transition stage right now, which made this set of topics really interesting to me in particular, because the three founders of the organization who've been there for 30 years have just recently stepped out of active day-to-day management. And so a lot went into changing our organization to make that possible and effective. And we are now continuing to work through that. So this is a great topic for me to be thinking about and addressing.
Great, thanks, Wynn. Joe, over to you.
Thank you, Dave, and hello, everyone. Joe Moats here. I lead a team of 140. We're the Moats Corporation, which entails the development of sports stadia fields. We design and build sports fields and get a kick out of doing that here in the Midwest. And when we get the opportunity to select facilities around the country, and sometimes we work internationally to bring our technology. We're 43 years young. I started with a pickup truck and a shovel, and it's been a whale of a ride. A lot of self-realization of all the change that's required in leadership as you go from 1 to 150. And I think the thing that I'm most proud of is finally breaking through this barrier of I maybe know how best to do it, to get to a point in our recession where out of necessity I had to reach out and seek people in a very different way. Not people that knew how to grow great grass, but people who knew how to run a really cool business. So I had the opportunity to have a lot of young people in the marketplace at that time. And while I was leaning the operation up overall, went after new young leadership and told them, look, I need your help big time to be able to scale this. And so that set us on a wonderful track of becoming more open. And we are just now at a point educationally where we've been leading up to the time in 2018 we started our first tranche of an ESOP with a 20% share. So the rest of the organization has our 20% employee owners, and I'm the other percentage. So I look forward to this conversation, Dave.
That's great. Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Win, for the introductions. So why don't we go ahead and dive right in? So kind of first topic we were going to wrestle with was how to effectively guide employees through important behavioral change. Perhaps I'll start with Win on this question, and Joe on the next one. But Win, would you like to give a kind of perhaps an example of what you've experienced and learned from managing something like this?
Absolutely. So it's been a journey, not a surprise, as we have gone through the transition I just referred to of moving the co-founders out of active management to our existing executive team, just with fewer players on it. And when we were starting to head into that process, we thought we knew what we were doing. Two of our executives have been with us for close to 25 years, so we'd worked together a long time. But when we actually started talking about what it meant to change the structure of how we address problems and who addresses the problems, we realized we had a lot of work to do. So we brought in some outside help to help us work through a process where we stepped back and realized that our most important role wasn't necessarily to managing our individual departmental teams. Our most important role was being able to work together in a cohesive executive team group to set the strategy, the communication, the full direction of the company. And that took us a little while to get through it, because we thought we were doing a really good job. We'd been working together for a really long time, but really we were still working somewhat in our own silos. And so if some great product idea comes out of marketing and production thinks, well, we don't like that beer style, so we're not going to make it, and marketing saying, no, this is really what customers want, and we get to an impasse, and I'm simplifying this significantly, I'm sure you can imagine, but we get to an impasse and the conversation is not moving forward effectively, so someone just calls defeat, steps back, and lets someone else make the decision. And so what we learned through this process, what was most important, what the company needed most from us, was to be speaking with one mind and one voice. So what we do in our meetings, the discussion can go all over the place. There can be very heated conversations, very strong opinions, but what we walk out of that room with is an agreement on what we're doing, where we're going, how we're going to communicate it. And that has turned out to be hugely successful for us, because now we don't have to worry about energy being taken off in side directions. Instead, that team, particularly during this incredibly difficult time, are in lockstep with each other. Our story is complicated significantly in the sense that since we just went through this transition of taking co-founders off the executive team, we subsequently moved some of our middle level managers onto the executive team and some operators onto the middle level team. So that process started, believe it or not, in January, and then beginning of February, all of a sudden the world starts falling apart. And so that has been sort of trial by fire. But I have to say, the fact that the top level of the company got their act together in understanding what their role was, what their responsibility to the company and the individual coworkers was before we got into this second layer of transition and these difficult times, has been enormously helpful in getting us through this stage.
Yeah, and just to clarify on that, so the founders had led the company for a very long time. You guys have a leadership style, you probably finish each other's sentences. And so and people probably forget in the first few years, there's probably some storming and adjusting you guys were doing yourselves, but the team was probably very small at that point, right? And so this, would you consider this like to be the biggest transition the company has gone through internally as far as the organization understanding the leadership's interests, the styles, the decision-making, et cetera?
Absolutely. I think it's by far the largest step we've taken, and we have 30 years of sort of warming up to it, which is helpful, or 25 years when we actually started that process. And so it's while we may not have been perfect in the past, we were definitely making stepping stones toward getting there and making forward progress. But when we got to the actual transition time at 25 years, we realized that we needed to open up our thinking to other ways of making it. Couldn't just be business as usual as 3 principals stepped out and 8 new people stepped in. So while this certainly is the largest we have done, but I would say we probably were starting on it the first day. Doug and I walked in. My co-founders, if I didn't say, were my husband Doug and his sister Corky. And so we were rattling around the brewery all by ourselves for years before we started bringing people in. And that, I mean, even those days inform how we were then able to get through our transition that much later.
So it sounds like if somebody else is embarking on a similar significant transition in leadership, or maybe how things are organized, communication ends up being a really important factor in this. And what I heard you say is that you guys can storm and argue and fight things through, but when you walk out of the room, it has to be a unified voice, right? You
Absolutely.
I guess it'd be like the classic parenting example where a kid goes to the one they want to get the right answer from for them, right? You can't let that happen.
Nope.
Okay. That's great. Thanks, Wynn. All right, Joe, over to you.
That's great. A lot of similarities in our case as well. I think it's so cool to be able to look back at times and you can see more clearly in hindsight. But I think also in leadership, luck is what you make of it, and timing is everything. And it's just cool for me now to sit in this time of challenges. We talk about effective leadership and think how lucky I was a year ago. Just a little bit of background. We've talked about enabling people to really get out and refresh as they approach senior leadership in the organization through a sabbatical process. And so a year ago, my team was like, well, Joe, you're up first. You haven't taken one yet. And you've got all the gray hair. And I probably will roll out on a gurney one day out of the organization, but they're truly the ones that I champion now as to leading it. And so I said, yes, I guess I got to get out there and go for something. So I went on a wonderful 90-day sabbatical, which is a story in itself, very, very meaningful, powerful thing to do. Got the opportunity to go by Gwen's place and have some good Odell brew. It was awesome in Colorado. But I bring that up because we really spent a significant amount of time. I left in August, and we spent the whole first part of the year planning as a leadership team for how much change that was going to create, how everybody needs to now step up because the CEO is gone for literally a quarter of the year, 90 days. So it instilled a really intentional process of stepping up to the plate, and it caused a ripple effect all the way through the organization. And, by the time I left, they're all joke, you just don't worry about it. We got this, and they really did. We went through the modeling so much that literally over 90 days being away, I never made one phone call business related, only personal calls back to some of the team members that it had changed in their life in that period. So it was a wonderful experience and a wonderful opportunity to set ourselves up for what nobody, envisioned coming about. And it was just a further strong, piece of how much the leadership has changed in my organization and how powerful it becomes to be able to expand that, much as what Gwen's doing with her new team. The same with what we call our G6, our senior leadership team. We used to have an executive team, and then we had the next leadership team, and then the managers, and we've really flattened it out now in a role of saying, look, we've got expertise that's much broader. And so that was a wonderful setup to, what had happened starting in March of this year.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
Ironically, a situation that probably many of us in this space of people all thinking like owners as ESOPs, is this mentality of overachievement. And the new environment has caused us a lot of angst across the organization with, it was no problem to pivot and work remotely for those without gray hair. The one that's had the most problem is myself. I love going in, and that was part of the gig, where the rest of the organization has moved into the home environment and set up quite effectively, and supporting our operational teams, which are working under new protocol out in the field under the COVID-19 protocol. But they all have young kids, and a lot of she's at home too, he's at home too, and the children, and man, all of a sudden their ability to compartmentalize one or the other, it's all on top of each other. And so we've had to bring in a lot of more attention to stress management, reduction, mindfulness, all kind of relaxation kind of modeling, and a lot more sharing just on the personal level, ironically, than we do when we're in the work environment facing each other every day, because you really kind of need to go there and let everybody know, please relax and take some time, take a break, because you can get, I think many of us feel that we can get just entrenched on the Zoom all day and eat you up.
That's interesting, Joe. So because people are working at home, it sounds like the initial adjustment to just doing the work wasn't the challenge. The challenge is this kind of overachievement, that every hour is being either family or work, and they're probably not, the routines have been broken down because of that, the old work routines. So it sounds like, again, for you, communication is a very important part of this. You acknowledged it first, and then the communication, but then you developed some programs. And it sounds like, are those going well? Those kind of stress management programs, the meditation, things like that?
We're getting great traction out of both, mindfulness programs around relaxation, meditation. I never dreamed it would be effective remotely, but it's like our team is much more engaged in seeking things like that now, because of just their own innate desire to meet the bar, and everybody is high level expectations for each other, and they don't want to put out work that doesn't meet expectations. So they're working like the Dickens, in an environment that is a little bit more challenging because of all the overlap with family. And so, yes, it's trying to get them. So we've had a lot more, happy hours virtually. We're doing now twice a week, and we're doing mindfulness every week, and trying to engage the team in ways that aren't just straight, let's get the work done, but let's also, just take some time to relax and enjoy your family, enjoy life, enjoy each other.
That's great, Joe. And then went on this topic, and then I'll move to the next one. We had an interesting conversation yesterday, I thought, and there's a reality here that this may go on for quite some time, right? This is not something that, I think, you want to be optimistic and say, hey, look, we'll be back to business in a month or two. But the truth is, things have changed, right? And it is going to take some time. Are you finding that, and again, this is kind of part of that, helping people set expectation, helping people behaviorally. Have you had to communicate to folks, we're in kind of for a long marathon here, or anything along those lines?
I think that, I'm sorry, you were asking Joe. I thought you had asked.
No, you went. No, for you went.
Go ahead.
I think that, to Joe's point, most of our people are dealing with a whole other life at home, as we all do, but with young children or older parents, and I think that they probably have figured it out even before we did, that this is going to be a really long time. We just got new direction from our governor in the state of Colorado, and it's months that he anticipates slow pulling back before we're all back in the thick of it. And by then, our world will change so much. I don't think we'll come back operating the same way we did when we all left a month and a half ago. I think everything will have changed, and in many respects, I think it will have changed for the better as we work through some of the things Joe talks about to keep ourselves sane and productive and moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's interesting. There's that concept of the Stockdale paradox, right? The Admiral Stockdale in Vietnam in prison, and he, in his book he wrote, or his book decades ago, he wrote that the people who actually suffered the most and didn't make it were the optimists, which is counterintuitive. He said it was the pragmatists, the realists. They're the ones that survived because they didn't set artificial deadlines like, I have to be home by Christmas. I have to be home by July 4th. I have to be home by my mother's birthday. They were like, I'll get home someday. I just don't know when, right? And for some reason, that kind of bifurcated between the people who survived that brutal imprisonment and the people who just heartbroken didn't make it. And not to be over dramatic about it, but I think a little of that is how we have to have our mindset today, don't you think? You know, that we just don't know exactly when. We'll get there, right? We're going to get there.
It's to believe that we'll get there.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
But I think as you're both saying, that there is going to be quite different. We're finding much of our team, you know, once you're put into a different environment like this, it's like, wait a minute, we can be pretty effective in this environment. We're not traveling near as much as we did before in order to engage with a client, where in our case, we have to travel, you know, around the state, around the country to client sites. Now we're just popping on this format and doing it, you know, and it's work and deals are happening. And so it's hitting us on a lot of fronts there. I'm literally was in the middle of starting, I'm all excited about the place also being part of the experience. You know, it's about culture, process, culture, but how much experiential things can happen when the campus, when the place is right. So I was on this big one campus concept kick as we approached this whole thing and had not yet pulled the trigger on the size of the design of it. But now we're really having second thoughts on, wait a minute, across the breadth of our organization, everybody's like, well, wait a minute, some of this gig working from home has some nice sides. It's not very far to the office, and I can be pretty effective if I can not get myself enslaved to it forever, but I can be pretty effective here. So it's really causing us to think harder about what is the new norm going to look like. You know, it's going to be, in our case, more hotel space than everybody having their designated space, and totally changes up the environment of what that facility is going to feel and look like, and what kind of safety measures are in place from a health standpoint, et cetera.
So we got all kinds of changes coming at us. It's going to be a while.
Crazy.
So let's hit the second topic. Maybe I should ask, and I don't know, but have either of you had to do any furloughs or layoffs in the current period?
We have not.
Okay. So, you know, one of the topics we're going to cover is kind of how to lead through a necessary layoff or restructure. And when we talked about this the other day, I said, well, you know, how to avoid it is probably the thing we could speak to the most. And so, do you guys want to spend just a couple minutes each on that, maybe starting with Joe?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Whether it was too risky or not, we just felt, you know, like so many of us in this family of companies that have employee ownership, we felt like, you know, now it's time to put up leadership-wise. So immediately we said, you know, it's going to be at the very last that we have to start cutting into our people in any way. So, you know, your job is going to be preserved. You know, we're going to take broad pain and significant pain on the leadership level first before we have to go into any of those policies. So that was just so obviously well appreciated, and tremendous feeling of heart across the organization. It really spoke volumes, I think, to helping us pivot so effectively across the breadth of the organization. So yes, we've been able to avoid it. Some is luck because of the space we're in, but some also I think is because of just we moved very quickly from defense to getting the team on offense. Dang it, you can be offensive in that, you know, you can go on offense in this period. It doesn't be like you have to spend much time like woe is me. And so we really started changing the messaging up to how can we take this big major global challenge and make improvements, across the breadth of our group.
And we'll get to that more, I think, Joe, in the next question too. So, or the next scenario. How about thoughts on this?
Layoffs, yeah. So we actually had a little pre-work on this because going into 2018, we were aware that we were going to have not a great year. And so we put in wage freezes, hiring freezes. But then at our next all-company meeting, we have 4 a year, the question came up that we see many other breweries doing layoffs at this time because it's a tough year. Is Odell considering layoffs? And we were able to honestly say, no, we're not considering layoffs at this time, but we had discussed it at length at the board level, which is where that decision would be made. And the board recognized that it could certainly help us in the short term financially, absolutely recognized that it would hurt us in the long term culturally, and determined that this was just something that we were not going to commit to at this time. But along with that message, we also shared that that doesn't mean we will never have layoffs. At some point, it may happen, but that's our logic to get us through now. And so now here we are in another period where we're getting the question, are we going to get layoffs? And our response to it is we would do anything to avoid it. We have so far, we are lucky enough to get the payroll protection plan funding, some of that, which will help us.
Good.
But segueing into probably your next question, Dave, is we are putting the onus on our co-owners to get creative about how we can find new revenue generating opportunities, how each individual can find a way to contribute not only to the long-term success of the company, but the direct bottom line in the here and now. And the message has been heartily received. People are, some of the stuff they're doing is crazy, but they are really all in, understanding that they have the personal obligation and opportunity to help the company weather this time.
That's great. Well, let's dive into it. Both of you guys are kind of brushing up against it. So how do we thrive in difficulty? How do we go, to use Joe's term, from defense to offense and, look at the other side of the coin? You want to go first, Joe?
Sure.
Smile.
I think it starts with each of us. With any major change, there is a curve, an inverted curve that occurs. We all know that. And we have to allow time for, there is some grief. There's some denial initially. There's time to grieve a bit and just share, the challenge with that. I think to do so, go on the offense too quickly is premature for people's hearts and souls. And so you have to kind of feel across the breadth of your organization, what is the timing of this? But certainly I think leadership can start to move the agenda and start to create, that feeling of there is an outcome to this where we could have some pretty cool things happen as a result, and start to move and do that incrementally, week by week. We started focusing on, weekly wins and things we can just that are in our control in front of us that we can manage here now. And some of it starting out with how can we better care for each other? Let's get the best systems we can so that you're set up as comfortable as we can help make you in your home environment. So with all the IT and hardware support we can bring to you, with other things just to make your life a little bit easier. And then started to ratchet that and start to capture the wins we were getting and coupling those together. And it just starts, I think, this inertia feeling of, what, I think we got this. I think we're doing okay, we're not falling apart. And so there's this, as you do, once you get the flywheel going, it can start moving more effectively that way, and to where it's almost a self inertia that continues to happen across the group. That we've it's that part of the process has been fun. Honestly, we've had in some ways, the more remote we become, the more together we become, because there's this daily desire to chat with each other and spend some time. So it's had its positives as well.
So Joe, you had a couple of examples of things that you guys are doing that are pretty creative. Do you want to talk about that? Something to do with empty stadiums?
Yeah, as you can well imagine. My gosh, you think of all the high schools and colleges and pro facilities across the country sitting idle. And that's our dance floor. That's all our germane is how can we make that the most exciting play and surface ever, and really wow people with it. And all of a sudden nobody can come there. So we rolled out our first yesterday, and it came from within, somebody seeing a technology within my company and saying, you know what, now might be a really cool time to virtually shout out this dance floor with nobody in the stadium. So it's actually an air, it's over my head as to how in the world you computerize this airflow to create an image on a surface of grass. We know how we can stripe grass to make it look light and dark, and we do cool things in stadia that way. But this literally, we can imprint an image by changing the direction of the grass blade. And we did one for Ohio Health yesterday, and in one of our soccer stadia. That says hashtag we're in this together, or it just says in this together. And we've got over 4,000 hits on it as of today. It's only 24 hours. It's really kind of gone viral to where other stadia are now asking for, to put a message on their field, of their choice that they want to go out to the community. And others, it wants to do it for hospital first responders. And so it's really getting the wheels turning as to how can we socialize or get out of what's a closed stadium a really cool message on a whole different level.
That's awesome. Thanks, Joe. Wynn.
So
going on offense.
Yeah, going on offense. Ideally, everything we'd redeploy our coworkers to would be revenue generating. I have to say, realistically, that is absolutely not happening. We do have a couple of opportunities there. The one that has been most productive, or is about to be most productive for us, I will say. Actually, two. So the one that is most productive currently is we are responsible as beer distributor. We distribute in our own county in Colorado. We are responsible for getting beer on the shelves in grocery stores and independent liquor stores. And right now, beer is selling pretty well in the stores. And so, did I mention that we are an essential business? I think I did.
I'm not
We
sure.
actually are.
It better be.
Beer is food production, distribution, and sales. So we're an essential business. We're still making beer, which is, it's a great. Nonetheless, we have to get our beer on the shelves in the grocery stores. And so we have, 25 people who operate our tap rooms where we serve beer directly to consumers who are out of jobs because the tap rooms are all closed. They're like restaurants and bars. So those people are now out at 4 a.m. in the morning in the grocery stores all over our county putting beer on shelves. And they get a couple hours of paid work for it. It helps our bottom line. They feel good because they're contributing, and they're in the stores at 4 a.m. So there's no one there at that point. So we're not putting them significantly in danger as a result. A few people have chosen not to, but most have said, I will do anything it takes to get out there. We also have used those same taproom folks to help the community some. So we've done targeted free beer opportunities for healthcare providers, for volunteers in certain organizations where they can do a drive-by pickup. We have a lot of excess inventory at this point since we can't sell into bars and restaurants. They can do a drive-by pickup. We throw beer in their trunk and they go off and they're happy. And that's more of a feel-good effort than moving the company forward, but the feel-good not only for the recipients, but for the co-owners who are providing the labor for it, has been just a huge morale boost for us.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, we also have taken advantage, to some extent, what you're talking about, Joe, and that is we have big projects that are underway that we had X time table on that we're not going to be able to meet because of constraints, but we're accelerating some of the work on them that we can do now that we might have anticipated doing in several months. So again, it's not bringing money to the bottom line, but it's keeping people busy so that we don't have to contemplate layoffs. It's making them feel good, and it's actually contributing to future revenue generation. So those have all been really positive for us.
And when you also, maybe that was the last point, but I may have put it differently, you're investing in more training now than ever, right? You're using this as an opportunity to really kind of sharpen the sword of the organization, I believe.
Yeah, that's a great point. I did hear you mention that. We're doing it in a couple ways. Obviously, our production folks there's all sorts of training for them to move into different roles or different opportunities. We have an education coordinator on our team in the company who creates content for training opportunities. Some are more just basic education. Some are specifically, this is how we bottle beer. So if you're interested in this job, watch this, go shadow with someone, and maybe you can move into that role. So we've been doing a lot of that. So the cross-training will be a huge strength moving forward, that we have all these people now positioned to have some movement in their job positions. But we're also doing a lot of training for just history of the company, beer education, what are the different styles. This is not actually training, but this is sort of keeping people from going crazy. Did you know that you can do Orange Theory and Core Power Yoga workouts online now? They have them, they're really fun. So we've been encouraging our people on work time to take 10 minutes to do one of those every so often. And we've been keeping them busy, and that has helped with morale and has helped us feel like we have idle people who really shouldn't be standing around.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
And Joe, I think you said there's some partnering things you've been thinking about too, right? That could be fairly transformative.
Yeah. It's we've got two platforms. We're feeling like this is a time we want to really look back on and say, wow, we really, as part of this offensive initiative, the internal platform, much like you, Gwen, we're our chief strategy officer. She's all about developing leadership across the organization so that we have wonderful opportunity to start scaling the model, that was started as one and is now many to a broader audience. But we want to do that through developing of our own leadership such that the culture feels and looks and acts the same it does in another city that people have come to know here. So an internal focus on leadership development this has given us wonderful opportunity to really immerse deeper into that. Externally, our goal is to not speak too prematurely, but our goal truly is to do an acquisition by the end of this period, because we look at our surrounding parallel spaces, and we've got firms that have great heart, that are doing cool things, but some are getting really whacked, as we know, extremely hard in this space, and maybe don't have the organizational leadership to pivot as quickly, but they do great things out on the front line. And so reaching out to them is an active part of what we're doing, is just forming association relationships around our perimeter as to how could we maybe be in a better spot by merging in some way, acquiring, such that when we come out of this, they'll be in a better position being part of a bigger operation. And our client base has got more that we can provide them with.
Okay. That's great, Joe. So I think we have a couple of questions. So we go to the questions from the audience. I think the first one is, Do you have any engagement issues with production versus office employees? Does want to take a shot at that one?
I'll start on that one. We are fundamentally a manufacturing business. We make beer, and we've worked hard over time to break down the wall between it's a joke in our organization, the carpet walkers and the people who are actually working the product. And I think we've done a very good job, but it does exist. And what we found here was that we didn't anticipate was production is still working. They could use some help. And so we had some of our coworkers who didn't have meaningful work to do want to volunteer to go back and support those processes. And they went back and were very enthusiastic, and the reception was hostile. The reception was hostile because there was a concern about social distancing. And our operation is big enough that ordinarily there's plenty of space between two people working, either making the beer or packaging the beer, but adding these extra bodies confused that a little bit. And some of the people who were volunteering to come back there were overly enthusiastic. So our biggest challenge was breaking that apart and saying, wait a minute, these are people who are trying to help. The people who didn't have work are trying to help the organization move forward. They think they're helping you personally in your job, and you're being angry at them. So, I mean, easy enough solution. You step back, you reset, get started again, make sure everyone has the appropriate training. And we essentially aligned one individual who was looking for work with an individual who could use help with work. So it wasn't just two teams operating parallel, it was individuals being encouraged to work together to create a safe work environment and get the work done. And so I think coming out of this, that this will turn out to be one of those positive interactions. Started out negative, but the end result is that everyone is being more thoughtful about each other, and everyone is considering other people's motivations rather than how their actions appear.
That's great. Joe, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I'll jump in there too, if I could, Dave. I think that's always, just reality in any business is you've got the operational components and then the supportive components. It's the on the carpet versus off. And there is always, I think, that potential for tension between those two. And I won't deny that, it's challenging for all of us. Our operational teams in the field are out there, through thick and thin. It's extremely hot in the summer and freezing literally in the winter. And so it's a tough environment to be building in the weather. And so it can look like the office environment is a pretty cushy place to be, So we have established for some time a cross training opportunity to where we bring people, superintendents from the field into the office to have them work together in roles. And some of it was our own doing in the way our hiring process evolved, where we'd always kind of look externally for the next supportive administrative person. Now we always give due just time internally first and really try to foster the development of our operational team member being able to come in to the office and now work, in internal ops or sales or marketing, whatever it might be. That's helped greatly because the message quickly gets out that, wait a minute, it's pretty tough on that. It can be pretty tough in that environment as well. So that has helped. I think the other thing that has helped us greatly, and especially then preparing for times like this, is really frequent communication from leadership out to the front line. And I've been doing that in what I call weekly cup of Joe, which is just messaging the pulse of what I'm feeling and what the leadership is feeling out to the organization on a weekly basis. That's grown now with COVID-19 to a daily process between the leadership and the superintendents in the field, just checking in, on what's going on each other's front. The third tier is we as leadership have put ourselves forward to being the first to do a cleanup should it be needful in our operational units, so that, you know, the person that's going to come in and sanitize that site is going to start with myself. And then we had, you know, a whole list of people volunteer immediately to step up to take part in that. So this sense of, hey, there's nothing in this organization that anybody is not willing to do. Everybody is responsible to step up. And so that those kind of just practices has helped so much to help separate that barrier that might otherwise exist.
Great. Thanks, Joe. And we have another question, and I'll encourage other questions. This is the only other one we have right now from some of the attendees. So if you have a question, please submit it. And we do have about 15 minutes left. And this may build on, Joe, kind of what you were saying just a moment ago. Could you share your innovative ideas for keeping your remote workers engaged? When you want to take that first?
Sure, the not so innovative, but what we're all doing so much is this remote conferencing. It definitely is far better than just getting on the telephone or sending an email to actually be looking at someone. They have to have gotten dressed that morning and brushed their hair to get on the camera. So I think it's a way of keeping people feeling like they're being professional and productive. Just as Joe said, very high touch in terms of how much communication there is from their direct team leader, their teammates, from we also called our leadership team, not an executive team. From that, folks, a lot of information going out so people feel that they at least know what's going on in the company. We're sharing a lot of our successes with some of the new projects that we're getting a jump on right now. And then, you know, we make beer. So we, not surprisingly, have a lot of virtual happy hours, and it's different groupings of people who get together just for an hour to be able to see each other's face and laugh a little. But one I want to share that turned out to be a huge success for us was a virtual scavenger hunt. So everyone in the company was invited. They were randomly assigned a team. So this is 150 people on, I think it was 12 different teams. And they're all doing it remotely. So they have their own team and they're remotely checking in, and they have to come up with, all right, who has the most creative home improvement project you've been doing while you've been sitting at home? Who has the best costume? Who has the worst alcohol drink that you're never going to touch but has been sitting in your pantry? Really silly stuff. And then the co-founders took all this information that they generated and spent way too much time analyzing it to give prizes to the winning answers on the winning teams. And I was amazed at how the hunts started out a little slow because people didn't necessarily know each other really well in the team they were on, but man, they got into it once they got started. So that was a huge amount of fun, and we're going to try to find other things that bring the whole company together like that to keep that momentum going.
That's awesome. That's great. What do you think, Joe? I'll have you there, Joe?
I just got back, yes.
Oh, okay, good.
Sorry, I kicked out.
So any other innovative ideas you want to share on kind of keeping your remote workers engaged? You got the Cup of Joe, which sounds great. Others?
Yeah. Let's see. I heard a couple of grins before I got kicked out, and we similar. One practical one that's been really helpful is we've tried to give each sector of the organization an opportunity to ad-lib with a project, to go after take this time to really get a win on a project and think, because we're thinking we have to think so far outside the box and norm anyway. And that's where things like, how can we make these dormant stadiums come alive? Is those kind of fun things. Another one that they came up with that I can't imagine we would have you just, it's like, how can we take this terrible situation and make it better? You know, your heart just goes out to all the schools, especially the seniors, as you know, this letdown on graduation, which can be, and those in the sporting community, and just all the whole community of students to have the end of the year end the way it was or is, you know, happening is, it's got to be tough when we look back and on, I think we all look back on our high school days, you know, it's just so fondly, and you leave from that into college and it's totally different atmosphere. So our marketing team with this project initiative came up with just a super cool thing of where a heartfelt message to reach out to those in our region that we build, just appealing to that empathy that they're dealing with, and that launched this week. It too is kind of like the Stadia coming to life, the messaging. It's now gone pretty viral to where teachers and parents have the opportunity to shout we've given them the opportunity on our platform to shout their heroes out, their students, you know, and really celebrate the things that they have done. And so it's another marketing initiative that obviously would have never happened if not for this, you know, this difficult situation we're in. But it's such a hard, I mean, it's a real tearful kind of joy as people express their feelings about it. So in some respects, it's brought our hearts out so much more as an organization. And I think any time we can do that as leaders, it's when we're truly getting to the soul of our team members. So those have been pretty awesome kind of things to foster and see grow in the organization.
Right. That's great. Hey, Joe, can I go back to something you said much earlier? You talked about you have to kind of have a sense for when the right time is to shift from kind of defensive measures and kind of, you know, looking at where you can save money, where you can kind of share the burden, to offense. But you said it takes some time. Do you have any suggestions on how you can tell if your organization is ready for that shift?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you really have to know your team members. You have to know the amount of push versus support versus, you know, push versus holding up. You can't invent it in the moment. It has to be one where the culture is rich in the organization. And I think if your culture is really strong, there's just this intuitive sense of where each other are. But I think as leaders, you know, it's upon us to really set the bar and to set the tone. And we well know that. I mean, if we come home and we're crying and whining and woe it's me, pretty soon the whole family is reacting that way. And it's the same in the work environment, obviously. If we're upbeat, others around us are going to feel more of that. And so I think it's just always pushing that envelope. At least in my case, it's setting that agenda that damn it, you know, we're gonna win in this. And it's an infinite game. When you're an evergreen organization, you're looking at this, you know, over evergreen is a long time. So,
let's call it forever.
We're going to get through this.
That's great. Would you want to add to that, Wen?
I appreciate Joe's comments. It is important to assess each individual to see how and when you can start pushing. And when they're working as a group, I guess you need to rely on the ones who are more eager and more ready to move to help bring along the ones who are having more difficulty with it. But ultimately, I mean, everyone has to get on board with moving forward. And it's it's wonderful to be able to do it with a team environment when you have a safe team, you have a team that trusts each other, you all are focused on the best result for the entire company. So the people who may be less ready have sort of a little bit of a safety net with the folks who are taking the steps first.
Do you guys, I'm curious, given you said that, do you guys practice open book management?
For 20 years.
20 years. Joe, you?
Wynn's way ahead of me. We have since 2010, yes.
Would you argue that that's part of this being able to be successful? We're working remotely, that people understand the business, they understand how you make money, they understand how they can contribute. Feels like that, yeah.
Absolutely. And when we became an ESOP company, we way elevated the level of teaching we do to help people understand what results from the work they do. And that connection between the success of the company and the work you put into it is a perfect way to move a company forward. I've been teaching the class for 20 years. I love it that much that I feel it's so important for us to invest in the minute someone walks in the door saying, all right, we're taking the curtain back. Here's everything that's going on here. You don't need to have any suspicions about people taking trunk loads of cash home with them. This is how we operate. And then over time, because we review it at every quarterly meeting, they see it again. We have a 5th review when we get our ESOP valuation, explaining how our efforts led to our results for that year. So I think it's enormously powerful for this.
Oh, that's great. And I'm curious too, do you guys use objectives and key results or a system like that also for setting annual objectives?
Yeah. Not really. We do at our leadership level team, but that's a relatively new process for us. We don't tend to be process rigorous.
Got it. How about you, Joe? Okay.
Yes, on both. We're getting better at part 2, which is a further depth of transparency, is getting the whole organization focused on what your key results are. But I'm with Gwen, just huge in the process. To have that open transparency is so necessary to the run up for us of the engagement that you get through employee ownership, and certainly the awareness of everybody rowing together in a time like this is just hugely advantaged through a process of full transparency, and that daggone it, I don't, being the most vulnerable and being vulnerable across the organization, that reaching out to each other for help is huge. Ironically, I just find that, you're shouted out as that much better leader, the more vulnerable you're willing to be.
Yeah, you said something earlier about luck, Joe, I think, and having a workforce that you guys have trained, you're transparent with, that trust you, you trust them. I mean, that's got to be one of the best things for you going into an unexpected situation like this. So, as I say, we just have a minute or two, so I was going to let each of you have a moment for kind of closing comments, words of encouragement, thoughts, wisdom, whatever you like. Give it to you. Joe, do you want to go ahead? Because I think I might have cut you off right there.
Sure. Yeah, the question becomes, how do we each scale it to others so that we can be, in our case, an evergreen organization? So my challenge to my younger leadership team is that, I reflect on 10 years ago and what a paradigm shift that was in our organization. And I challenge our team with maximizing the opportunity on this situation. This is going to truly define your leadership. It's going to define who we are. And so in that sense, not to be crass about the hardship, but it's an amazing opportunity to define the leadership of the future for yourself. And the organization is forever going to look at how you reacted, how we move forward as an organization. So it's there for you, for us, and take advantage of it, please. So that's my coaching to my team.
Thanks, Joe. That's great. Wynn?
I sort of forget the question, but I'll give you an answer anyway.
It was vague.
That's right. So with the open book question, I think that our company, having been open book for 20 years, is a very powerful part of our personality, and people respect it, appreciate it, and feel it connects them more to the company. The evergreen principles are the second piece of that for us. So having that be front and foremost with our coworkers, everyone knows about them. We talk about them all the time. And when you hit the bottom, like we all have right now, and your co-owners can see that you are living these principles, and when things start going sideways, someone can say, but wait a minute, is that really how we operate, people first? Then that gives them that much more trust and confidence in the organization. And so I honestly think at the end of this, we will in many ways be in a better place in terms of our organizational health.
That's awesome, man. Thank you. And Joan, when you're both leaders, I have tremendous admiration for you. You both have wonderful evergreen companies, and I wish you the best through this very turbulent time. And I know you'll get through it. And thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom and your thoughts with everybody else. I'm sure this is puts a little wind in other people's wings and lets them know that, you know, the situations they're facing aren't, we're all going through this, right? And we're all going to get through this. So
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dave.
absolutely. Take care, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks
bye.
again.
See you, Glenn.